In the early years of the Pacific War, the ocean itself had become a battlefield without borders. Beneath its vast, indifferent surface, steel vessels hunted one another in near silence, guided by imperfect instruments and fragile human judgment. Among these predators was an American submarine that, by every official measure, should never have left port. The submarine had a reputation long before it reached open water. Engineers whispered about unreliable ballast controls. Officers complained of faulty gyroscopic readings. A minor collision during training exercises had left hairline fractures in non-critical sections of the hull, nothing catastrophic, but enough to earn the vessel a quiet label among dockyard crews: problematic. Repairs were rushed, documentation incomplete, and several issues were logged for future resolution. In wartime, future was a luxury no one truly had. Command faced an uncomfortable reality. Submarines were being lost faster than they could be replaced. Experienced crews were scattered, reassigned, or buried at sea. In this climate, a damaged submarine was still a submarine, and that meant it could still be sent into the depths. Orders were signed. A mission was assigned, vague and conservative. Patrol a quiet sector of the Pacific, avoid engagement, gather what little intelligence you can, and return. For the men aboard, the departure carried a different weight. Submarine crews were intimately aware of their vessel's personality. Every unfamiliar vibration, every delayed gauge response, every sound that didn't belong. As the engines came alive and the dock lines were cast off, there was no ceremony, no music, no speeches. Only the low hum of machinery and the unspoken knowledge that this boat was not entirely trustworthy. Once submerged, the problems became harder to ignore. Depth readings fluctuated by a few critical meters. The compass lagged just long enough to introduce doubt. Sonar operators reported faint distortions, echoes that felt delayed, stretched, or blurred. None of it was dramatic enough to abort the mission. All of it was subtle enough to be dangerous. The Pacific at night was a vast emptiness, broken only by stars above and pressure below. Inside the submarine, time lost its normal meaning. Days blended into watches, watches into routines. Sweat mixed with oil and recycled air. Men slept inches from torpedoes, trusting thin steel to separate them from crushing darkness. Every system failure, however small, felt personal. Officially, the submarine was patrolling an area considered strategically unremarkable. Enemy activity was believed to be minimal. Japanese naval presence, according to Allied intelligence, was focused elsewhere. Maps showed open water, nothing more. No bases, no installations, no reason for heightened alert. And yet, something felt wrong. The boat's navigation errors slowly compounded. A misaligned gyro here, a current miscalculation there. By the time the crew attempted to verify their position, uncertainty had already crept in. They were no longer entirely sure where they were, only where they were supposed to be. Radio silence, standard for stealth, now became a double-edged sword. There would be no easy clarification from command. The captain faced a quiet dilemma: turn back and admit uncertainty, risking reprimand and professional damage, or continue forward, trusting instinct over instruments that had already proven unreliable. He chose the latter, unaware that this decision, born from necessity rather than confidence, was quietly steering the submarine toward one of the most closely guarded secrets of the Pacific War. At this stage, no alarms sounded. No enemy silhouettes appeared on the periscope. No dramatic confrontation unfolded. Just a damaged submarine, drifting through waters it was never meant to enter, guided by imperfect machines and human resolve. History, as it often does, was not announced with thunder, but with a small, almost invisible deviation from the plan. The submarine that wasn't supposed to sail had already begun its accidental journey into the unknown. The moment the submarine slipped fully beneath the surface, the Pacific transformed from an open horizon into a sealed world of steel and pressure. Sunlight vanished quickly, replaced by the dull glow of red bulbs and instrument panels that never truly slept. Above them, thousands of tons of water pressed down with indifferent force. Below them, uncertainty deepened with every passing hour. Navigation aboard a submarine was never precise, but on this patrol it bordered on unreliable. The gyro compass hesitated, its readings lagging just enough to introduce doubt. Dead reckoning calculations, already vulnerable to ocean currents, were now being built on shifting assumptions. The navigator recalculated again and again, pencil marks smudging the chart, each correction nudging the submarine slightly off its intended path. At first, no one panicked. Small errors were expected, but as days passed, the discrepancies grew harder to ignore. Bearings that should have aligned didn't. Distances felt longer than predicted. The ocean currents behaved strangely, pulling the submarine with subtle insistence in a direction that didn't match the charts. It was as if the sea itself was quietly rewriting the mission. Radio silence, meant to preserve stealth, now became a suffocating constraint. The crew could not ask for clarification without risking detection. Every decision had to be made internally, based on instruments they trusted less with each passing hour. The captain listened to his officers, weighed their concerns, and chose caution over retreat. Turning back without clear cause would mark the mission as a failure, and failures in wartime carried consequences far beyond paperwork. Inside the submarine, the atmosphere tightened. The air grew heavier, tinged with diesel, sweat, and recycled oxygen. Conversations dropped to whispers, not because of enemy proximity, but because tension demanded it. Even laughter, rare to begin with, felt out of place. Men began to sense that they were drifting into a space that didn't belong to anyone, not even the enemy. Sonar became their only true connection to the outside world. The steady pulse of sound waves echoed into darkness and returned with information measured in seconds. For a long time, the results were unremarkable. Empty water, distant thermal layers, the faint presence of marine life. Then slowly something changed. The echoes began to behave oddly. Returns came back sharper than expected, then vanished entirely. At times, sonar operators reported faint reflections that suggested solid structures far below the surface, too regular to be natural, too fleeting to be trusted. Each time the readings were logged and dismissed as anomalies, faulty equipment, temperature gradients, operator fatigue. Yet the pattern persisted. The submarine's depth control issues worsened the unease. Ballast adjustments responded sluggishly, forcing the crew to compensate manually. Every dive and ascent required more attention than it should have. A minor malfunction at the wrong moment could send the vessel too deep, too fast. The crew trusted their training, but training did not erase the awareness that their margin for error was thinner than most. As the submarine continued forward, the maps began to feel increasingly abstract. According to Allied intelligence, this stretch of ocean held no strategic value. No shipping lanes, no enemy installations, no reason for heightened surveillance. And yet the captain could not shake the feeling that they were intruding, crossing an invisible boundary that existed only because someone had gone to great lengths to hide it. Night cycles blurred, watches rotated. The crew slept in short, restless intervals. Dreams, when they came, were filled with metal groaning under pressure and instruments spinning without control. No one spoke openly about being lost, but the idea lingered in the background of every conversation, like a word no one dared to say aloud. Then came the moment that shifted doubt into quiet alarm. During a routine sonar sweep, a return appeared, clearer than anything before it. It suggested a mass, stationary and artificial, far larger than a wreck or rock formation. The signal lingered just long enough to be recorded before dissolving back into static. The sonar operator called it out, his voice calm but tight. Officers gathered. Data was reviewed. The reading could not be easily explained. The captain ordered reduced speed and altered course slightly, not toward the contact, but not away from it either. He needed more information without revealing his presence. The submarine moved like a cautious intruder, aware that even sound could betray them. At this point, the crew still believed they were dealing with coincidence, perhaps a long-forgotten structure, perhaps nothing at all. No one yet considered the impossible, that they were nearing something deliberately erased from every known chart. Lost beneath the Pacific, guided by failing instruments and reluctant intuition, the submarine pressed on. It had not yet found the truth, but it was close enough now that turning back would no longer undo what had already begun. The ocean had a way of concealing its secrets until the very last moment. Beneath the submarine, the water grew colder and denser, layers of darkness stacked upon one another like hidden corridors. The charts insisted there was nothing here, no harbors, no installations, no reason for caution beyond routine. But the instruments, flawed as they were, had begun to tell a different story. The sonar room became the quiet heart of the vessel. Every pulse sent outward carried the possibility of revelation or disaster. Operators leaned closer to their screens, eyes tracing faint lines that appeared and disappeared without warning. These were not the soft, irregular echoes of rock formations or the drifting signatures of marine life. These shapes had edges, angles, intent. At first, the contacts appeared intermittently, as if whatever lay ahead was trying not to be seen. A brief reflection here, a sharp return there, too controlled to be natural, yet too elusive to confirm. Each time the signal vanished, doubt crept back in, whispering that the submarine's damaged systems were playing tricks on tired men. The captain ordered another course adjustment, this time deliberate and measured. Speed was reduced to the bare minimum required for control. Engines were throttled back until their vibrations blended into the ambient noise of the sea. Silence became a weapon. Every man aboard understood that sound, not sight, was the currency of survival below the surface. As the submarine advanced, the sonar returns stabilized. What emerged was not a single object, but a pattern. Multiple reflections aligned in unnatural symmetry, vertical surfaces where none should exist, flat planes interrupting the curvature of the seafloor. The data suggested structure, constructed, deliberate, and concealed beneath layers of water and secrecy. The navigation officer cross-referenced the position again, adjusting for every known error. The conclusion was unsettling. They were nowhere near any location marked on Allied intelligence maps. If this was a base, it was one that officially did not exist. The tension inside the submarine shifted from uncertainty to controlled alarm. No one spoke loudly now. Orders were passed with precision. Even breathing felt measured. The crew was acutely aware that discovery cut both ways. If they could see something hidden, it meant someone else might soon realize they were there. The periscope remained useless at this depth. Whatever lay ahead was buried too deep, cloaked not only by water but by intent. The captain faced an impossible choice: approach closer and risk detection, or withdraw and report ambiguous data that might be dismissed as faulty readings from a problematic submarine. He chose proximity. The submarine edged forward, its damaged systems pushed gently but firmly beyond their comfort zone. Depth control required constant correction. A slight miscalculation could send the vessel scraping against an unseen structure, or worse, reveal its presence through accidental contact. Then came the detail that erased all remaining doubt. Sonar returns now revealed hollow spaces, cavities too large and too uniform to be geological. These voids absorbed sound differently, producing echoes that suggested internal chambers. Something was down there, something vast enough to house machinery, personnel, perhaps even submarines of its own. The realization settled slowly but heavily. This was not a wreck, not debris, not an abandoned relic. This was an installation. Active or dormant, hidden with extraordinary care, positioned in waters the enemy believed invisible. The captain ordered the recording equipment secured and duplicated. Every fragment of data mattered now. If they survived, this information could reshape naval understanding of the region. If they didn't, it would vanish with them into the Pacific's silent archives. For the crew, fear mixed with awe. They were witnessing something no Allied force was supposed to see, a shadow cast by an empire that thrived on secrecy and misdirection. The irony was impossible to ignore. A broken submarine, sent on a low-priority patrol, had stumbled into one of the war's most guarded mysteries. Outside, the structure remained unseen, wrapped in darkness and depth. Inside, the submarine hovered like an uninvited guest, aware that discovery was no longer a question of if, but when. In waters where nothing should exist, the truth had finally begun to take shape. What the American submarine had uncovered was not merely an anomaly on sonar, but a carefully engineered deception, one built with patience, precision, and an obsessive commitment to secrecy. As the vessel held its cautious position in the dark, the fragmented data began to assemble into a terrifyingly coherent picture. The structure beneath them was vast. It extended outward from the seabed in layered sections, each level designed to disrupt sonar returns and scatter detection signals. Angled walls absorbed sound instead of reflecting it. Reinforced caverns opened into deeper chambers, large enough to house ships, machinery, and men. This was no improvised outpost. It was a strategic installation, built with long-term war planning in mind. Japanese naval doctrine had always favored concealment and misdirection, but this went far beyond traditional camouflage. The base had been positioned deliberately away from known shipping lanes and patrol zones. Its location exploited gaps in Allied surveillance, regions deemed too empty, too insignificant to monitor closely. The ocean itself had been weaponized as a shield. Inside those submerged chambers, activity was likely constant. Submarines could enter and exit unseen, shielded from aerial reconnaissance and surface patrols. Supply vessels could offload cargo beneath the waves, protected from observation. Repair facilities hidden underwater would allow damaged Japanese submarines to return to service without ever revealing their presence. In a war defined by attrition, such an advantage was invaluable. For the American crew, the realization was sobering. If this base remained undiscovered, it could sustain prolonged Japanese operations in the Pacific, undermining Allied advances and prolonging the conflict. Every convoy lost, every patrol ambushed, could trace its origins back to this unseen stronghold. The captain ordered further passive observation. No active sonar, no unnecessary movement. The submarine became a ghost, listening rather than searching. What little evidence they gathered came from subtle cues. Faint mechanical vibrations carried through water, irregular pressure changes suggesting internal movement, distant echoes that hinted at docking activity far below. The most unsettling discovery was the base's integration with the surrounding environment. Natural rock formations had been carved and reinforced, blending the installation seamlessly into the seabed. Even if Allied forces passed directly overhead, they would see nothing. The ocean floor revealed no scars, no obvious construction marks. It was a masterpiece of hidden warfare. As the crew absorbed the implications, a deeper fear emerged. Discovering the base was only half the danger. The the greater risk lay in being discovered by it. Japanese anti-submarine defenses were likely embedded throughout the complex, hydrophones, listening posts, and patrol craft operating silently in the surrounding waters. One careless sound could turn the hunter into prey. The captain faced another critical decision. Remaining longer would yield better intelligence, but every additional minute increased the risk of detection. The submarine's damaged systems, already strained, offered little margin for escape if compromised. This was not a confrontation they could survive. Orders were given to withdraw slowly, retracing their approach path as precisely as possible. Even retreat required discipline. Engines remained minimal. Course corrections were executed with painstaking care. The crew understood that the most dangerous moment was not discovery, but departure. As the submarine eased away, the hidden base faded back into shadow, reclaiming its anonymity beneath thousands of tons of water. It was as if the ocean itself conspired to erase what had been seen, but the data remained, recorded, preserved, proof that something impossible had existed where nothing was supposed to be. For the men aboard, the experience left a lasting imprint. They had glimpsed the hidden architecture of the enemy's war, an unseen layer operating beneath official narratives and public knowledge. The Pacific, they now understood, was not just a battlefield of ships and aircraft, but of secrets buried deep and guarded by silence. The submarine turned away carrying more than intelligence. It carried the weight of a discovery that could not be ignored, and a truth that would soon force the war into a new, more dangerous phase. Leaving the hidden stronghold was far more dangerous than finding it. Discovery had been accidental. Escape would require discipline, restraint, and no small measure of luck. As the American submarine slowly turned away from the shadowed installation, every man aboard understood that the slightest mistake could expose them to forces they could neither see nor outrun. The captain ordered a silent withdrawal. Engines were reduced to their lowest sustainable output, barely enough to maintain control. Even the smallest mechanical noise, an unsecured tool, a sudden valve adjustment, now felt amplified. In the deep ocean, sound traveled farther than intention, and the submarine's damaged systems were unreliable partners in secrecy. Almost immediately, the sea began to feel different. Sonar operators reported faint disturbances behind them, not clear contacts, but irregular patterns that suggested listening activity. Hydrophones detected low-frequency vibrations, distant and deliberate. These were not random ocean sounds. Someone, somewhere in the darkness, was paying attention. The submarine's crew moved with ritual precision. Depth changes were executed gradually, meter by meter, to avoid pressure spikes that might betray their presence. Ballast tanks responded sluggishly, forcing manual corrections. Each adjustment stretched nerves thinner, as the boat hovered at depths where even minor failures could become fatal. Inside the control room, sweat mixed with recycled air. Orders were whispered. No one looked away from their instruments for long. The captain stood rigid, calculating not only distance and speed, but probability, how likely it was that the base had already detected them, and how long it would take for Japanese countermeasures to mobilize. That question was answered sooner than anyone hoped. A new sonar contact emerged, sharp, mobile, and unmistakably artificial. It moved slowly at first, then adjusted course in a way that mirrored the submarine's own trajectory. The implication was chilling. If this was a patrol craft or submerged defense unit, it meant the base's protective net extended farther than expected. The captain ordered a controlled descent, using the complex thermal layers of the Pacific to distort acoustic signatures. It was a risky maneuver, especially with unreliable depth controls, but it offered the only chance to break contact. The submarine slipped deeper, pressure mounting against its already stressed hull. Metal groaned softly, a reminder of how thin the line between survival and collapse truly was. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The sonar contact wavered, blurred by shifting water temperatures. Then slowly it faded. No one celebrated. The crew knew this was not safety, only reprieve. The ocean around them remained hostile, and the damaged submarine was still far from friendly waters. Radio silence continued, denying them the reassurance of outside support. They were alone, carrying intelligence that could alter the course of the war, yet vulnerable enough to lose it all in a single misstep. As hours passed, the sense of pursuit gradually eased. No new contacts appeared. The submarine adjusted course once more, this time with greater confidence, putting distance between itself and the hidden base. But the psychological weight remained. Every unexplained noise triggered suspicion. Every sonar return was scrutinized as a potential threat. The truth they carried now felt heavier than the steel around them. The captain authorized the duplication of all recorded data, sonar logs, navigational readings, acoustic signatures. If the submarine did not survive, the information had to. Storage devices were sealed, marked, and distributed in separate compartments, an unspoken acknowledgement of the risks ahead. By the time the submarine finally reached safer waters, exhaustion had replaced fear. The crew had not slept properly in days. Their nerves were frayed, their trust in the vessel stretched to its limits. Yet beneath the fatigue was a quiet realization: they had escaped with something extraordinary. A broken submarine, limping through the Pacific, had uncovered a secret the enemy never intended to be seen, and lived long enough to carry it home. The most dangerous part of the mission was over. The most consequential part was just beginning. When the submarine finally returned to Allied-controlled waters, there was no celebration waiting for it. No bands, no photographers, no public acknowledgement of survival, let alone discovery. The vessel docked quietly, almost apologetically, as if aware that its greatest achievement was not meant for history books, at least not yet. The crew was ordered into immediate debriefing. What they carried was not a dramatic battle report, but something far more unsettling: proof that Allied intelligence had been incomplete in a way that could no longer be ignored. Sonar recordings were replayed in darkened rooms. Charts were overlaid with new data. Analysts leaned forward silent, as artificial shapes emerged where open ocean had once been assumed. At first, skepticism dominated the room. This was, after all, a submarine with known mechanical issues, a crew that had admitted navigational uncertainty, a patrol that had strayed from its intended sector. For a brief moment, there was a temptation to explain the discovery away, to classify it as an error, a coincidence, a ghost born from damaged instruments and exhausted minds. But the evidence refused to cooperate. Independent experts examined the acoustic signatures. Engineers compared the hollow returns to known construction methods. Intelligence officers cross-referenced the location with intercepted communications, unexplained shipping losses, and long-standing gaps in Japanese naval movements. Slowly, resistance gave way to realization. The hidden base was real, and its implications were profound. Allied Naval Command began to understand how Japanese submarines had appeared where they shouldn't, vanished when pursued, and sustained operations far longer than expected. The Pacific was no longer just a theater of open-water engagements. It was layered with concealed infrastructure that turned absence into advantage. The response was immediate but invisible. Patrol routes were rewritten. Surveillance zones expanded into previously ignored regions. New sonar tactics were developed specifically to detect structures designed to absorb sound. Submarine crews were briefed on the possibility of underwater installations, something that had once been considered improbable, if not impossible. Yet even as the strategic picture shifted, the crew of the broken submarine faded into silence. Their mission was classified, their logs sealed, their discovery buried under layers of wartime secrecy. They returned to duty, reassigned or rotated home, carrying a truth they could not discuss. Official histories would speak of gradual intelligence improvements, of adaptive strategy, but not of the accident that had forced that adaptation into existence. The submarine itself did not last much longer. Where damage and wartime urgency eventually caught up with it, it was decommissioned without ceremony, its steel repurposed, its name reduced to a line in naval records. No plaque marked its contribution, no public citation honored its role. And yet, its legacy endured. Long after the war, fragments of the story began to surface. Declassified documents hinted at unexpected underwater installations. Analysts noted sudden changes in Allied patrol behavior during the later stages of the Pacific campaign. Only then did the outlines of the truth become visible. A failure had succeeded where perfection might not have. A damaged submarine, sent on a low-priority mission, had drifted into history by accident. It had revealed that modern warfare was no longer confined to visible battlefields, but extended into spaces deliberately erased from maps and memory. The Pacific Ocean, vast and indifferent, had hidden a secret empire beneath its surface. And it was not advanced technology or flawless planning that exposed it, but a flawed vessel, guided by human judgment, persistence, and the refusal to turn back when certainty dissolved. In war, discovery is often imagined as the result of brilliance. But sometimes it belongs to the broken.